Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're trying to make sense of a world that, let's be honest, seems to have gone completely mad. You've got leaders threatening their closest allies, and talk of annexing territory from friendly nations is somehow on the table. It feels like pure chaos, but you know what? There might just be a logic to it all.
You know that stark warning? It doesn't come from some ancient text. That's Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of England, talking about right now. And what he's suggesting is that the old rules, the ones that kept the world, relatively stable for decades, they're just gone. Okay, so let's really dive into this.
So if we want to figure out where we're all headed, we first have to get a handle on what we've lost. What exactly was this system that governed the world, and why did it fall apart?
All right, let's take a look at the blueprint for the world order that for over 70 years actually managed to prevent another global catastrophe. It was literally born from the ashes of World War II with one single, incredibly ambitious goal: never again.
So the architects of this thing, we're talking about leaders like Churchill and Roosevelt. They built this order on three core pillars. First, a political pillar that basically promised borders would be respected. Second, an economic pillar, with big institutions like the IMF and the World Bank creating stable rules, giving loans and stabilizing currencies. And finally, the UN system, where every nation pledged to uphold human rights and international law.
Okay, but here's the thing. The story was always, partially a myth. The whole system had this glaring loophole. The most powerful nations, they often just exempted themselves from the rules. Yeah, international law was applied super strictly to small countries, but not so much to the big players.
But, and this is a huge but, despite these massive hypocrisies, the order was, in a lot of ways, a spectacular success. I mean, it led to a dramatic drop in wars between states, global trade absolutely exploded, and because of that, hundreds of millions of people were lifted out of extreme poverty.
The problem was, those economic gains weren't shared equally, not by a long shot. Especially in Western countries, huge chunks of the population felt totally left behind. And this fueled really deep popular anger that helped elect leaders who basically promised to tear the whole system down.
And the unraveling really was a team effort. You could say it started with the U.S. losing its moral credibility after authorizing torture back in 2003. Then, in 2014, Russia just shattered the political pillar by annexing Crimea. A few years later, the U.S. torpedoed the economic pillar with its trade wars. And now, today, you've got China building a parallel system of its own, directly challenging the IMF and the World Bank.
Okay, so the old order is dead. The crucial question now is what comes next? Is it just chaos, or is there a new set of rules emerging? Our investigation starts with the first major theory, a return to an old, familiar, and frankly, pretty brutal game.
This theory is called realism, and it basically argues that we're going back to a more traditional world, a world where international relations aren't governed by laws or high-minded ideals, but by raw strength, military force, and cold, hard national interest.
And in this kind of system, every country plays a different role. You've got the great powers, like the US, China, and Russia, and they're all seeking dominance. Then you have the middle powers, like, say, Canada, who try to balance the giants against each other. And the small powers, they're forced to pick a side or risk getting totally crushed.
So the core logic for any great power in this game is to build a buffer zone. It's what's known as a sphere of influence. Just think of the historic US Monroe Doctrine. The whole goal is to keep your rivals out of your backyard so they can't threaten you directly.
So when you look at it from this realist perspective, actions that seem totally wild, like threatening allies or talking about annexing Greenland, they aren't madness at all. Nope. They're part of a cold, calculated grand strategy. Consolidate power in your own hemisphere to get ready for the coming competition with Russia and China. But that theory doesn't explain everything. So let's move on to our second theory and see how this builds a very different and maybe even more disturbing picture of our new world.
Right, because if it's all about competing with China, why on earth would the US aggressively antagonize India, China's biggest regional rival? Some of these actions just don't seem to serve the national interest at all, which, casts some serious doubt on that first theory.
This second theory suggests we aren't going back to a world of nation-states at all. Instead, we're reverting to something much older and way more personal, a world run by the whims of ruling cliques for their own personal benefit.
Honestly, the Game of Thrones analogy is just perfect here. Foreign policy is no longer about the good of the country. It's about a small group of elites, a ruling house and its court, using the power of the state to enrich themselves and settle personal scores with other houses. And when you start looking through this neo-royalist lens, all those illogical actions suddenly make perfect sense. That Venezuela policy? It didn't really benefit the US, but it did benefit refineries owned by specific megadonors. The whole Greenland idea? Reportedly pushed by a billionaire with personal mineral interests. And those massive tariffs on India? They came right after its leader publicly embarrassed the US president. So there we have it, two competing theories, a cold game of national interest or a chaotic scramble for personal wealth and status. So which one is it, and what does it actually mean for the rest of us? Well, the reality is likely a messy and, frankly, an incredibly volatile combination of both. What we're seeing are the old, ruthless power games of nation-states being twisted and distorted by the personal whims and financial interests of a new class of global rulers and their billionaire courts. And the takeaway for us is pretty simple and pretty unsettling. Whether these conflicts are driven by national strategy or just personal greed, the result is the same: a more dangerous and unstable world. I mean, this could mean more volatile energy prices, disruptions to the supply chains that stock our shelves, and a much greater risk of regional conflicts spilling over.
The old world is gone. The liberal order is dead. What comes next is being written right now in real time, and it leaves us with a final, crucial question to ponder. Will a new, stable order be built from these ashes, or is this the beginning of something much, much darker?